Food, and Resiliency and Forest. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this morning on House Bill 739 to provide a high-level summary of the process that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency utilizes to regulate pesticide registration, and most importantly, explain the ongoing relationship between U.S. EPA and the state regulators to help ensure that pesticide products are approved for use in the state. I am Dr. Manojit Basu, the Vice President of Science Policy and Regulatory Affairs at CropLife America. I have a PhD in biological sciences. I held adjunct professor position at Johns Hopkins University, teaching regulatory policy and other courses to graduate and undergraduate students. At CropLife America, we represent the developers, manufacturers, formulators, and distributors of pesticides used in agriculture. As you know, pesticides are a critical component of any agricultural system and are amongst some of the most heavily regulated products in the United States. These products are governed by the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and the Endangered Species Act. FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, was enacted in 1947 and governs all registration, distribution, sale, and use of pesticides in the United States. Each approved pesticide must undergo an extensive human and ecological and environmental risk assessment, requiring registrants to generate extensive scientific data necessary to address the identity, composition, potential adverse effect, and environmental fate of each pesticide before they can be registered. FIFRA also governs the pesticide label requirements, outlining the precise language and location for warning statement, approved uses, and application information. All pesticides used in the US must be approved and registered with EPA, and exposure tolerances or exemption established prior to a registration decision. After an EPA registration is issued, each pesticide then needs to be registered with the state lead agency for the use in that particular state. Our regulatory framework is of cooperative federalism and works collaboratively with state regulators, such as the Vermont Department of Agriculture, who approves and enforces state and federal laws on the use and application of pesticides. Registrants must register the pesticide with the department before sale and distribution in Vermont. This process between federal and state regulators ensure that pesticides on the market meet high health and safety standards for the approved uses. The work doesn't end there. Once a pesticide is approved and it reaches market, EPA scientists continue to review data and studies to ensure the ongoing safety of existing products. EPA must re-review each pesticide registration at least once every 15 years. Within those 15 years, EPA can request new data and information from manufacturers as needed. Passing House Bill 739 could undermine the existing robust and long-standing federal regulatory framework on pesticides. It would disadvantage Vermont farmers by limiting access to effective tools for pest management, resulting in a patchwork of policies jeopardizing farmers, farm workers, and consumers' safety. And for those reasons, we express opposition of this bill. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Great, Dr. Basu, thank you very much. May I ask where you're calling from today?
I'm calling from just outside Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia.
And CropLife America is, we should know this, but maybe some of us don't. Can you just explain a little bit about the business that CropLife America is in?
Sure. CropLife America is a national trade association representing the pesticide industry in the US. So as I mentioned, all formulators, manufacturers, distributors of pesticide active ingredients that are used in agriculture are members of CropLife America.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with Representative Nelson.
Sorry, I meant to have that hovering over the mute button. Thank you, Chair. Doctor, how has the label on Paraquat changed since it was first registered? Was it early 70s or back in the 60s that the EPA first registered Paraquat?
I am not sure about the exact date on and when EPA registered this particular pesticide product, but every time EPA does registration review, 15 years or prior to that, what we have often seen in general is the number of uses could go down. There could be further restriction because there are other products in the marketplace. Companies may have different requirements. So the label every 15 years as registration review happens, the label does change based on use pattern and a lot of other factors.
So you're not particularly sure. I mean, I know if you want to use Gramoxone from Syngenta, you have to take a course.
Yes.
I believe a 30-minute online course on how to use it. And there's also a lot of restrictions on PPE
Yes.
and other stuff that perhaps wasn't on the label 50 years ago.
Absolutely. Those are the things that continue evolving with registration review. Any new information that comes to the agency, any additional requirements the agency can put in during registration review or even before that. And those kind of label changes we continue to see. We could also see label updates in between if there is a new use or a new pest that the registrant is requesting for this particular pesticide. So it continues to happen all the time.
Okay. Thank you.
Representative Boslin.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you can see me. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can see
Okay,
you
great.
and hear, yeah.
Okay, great. So I have a question. You were talking about EPA and how it does certification. And I guess I'm wondering, maybe you can help me understand, how does the EPA determine what is a safe location or a safe use for something as opposed to a not safe use? Like, for example, with paraquat, as I understand it, it's banned from use on golf course. Okay, so if it's not safe to have on a golf course, how do they determine it's safe in an agricultural setting? Like what can they do to make it safe in one setting when it's not safe in another setting?
So there are multiple things going on here, and there are nuances. What are the uses the applicant is requesting for? The applicant may be requesting for a use on a golf course. They may not be requesting a use on a golf course, and they may only be requesting use on some specific crops and pests. So that's how a use or not use is identified. The applicant, in this case, if it's Syngenta or another manufacturer formulator, would apply for a specific use. EPA will do the risk assessment and then will say, okay, this approves, this passes the risk assessment, and we will approve this particular use. However, if the registrant has not asked for a different use, EPA is not automatically going to allow them to use in golf courses. I don't know if EPA, if Syngenta or someone else requested those golf course use or not. We don't specifically go into each product label. So that's one part
Yeah.
of it. And then also the agency would see what does the use pattern look like, what are the risks, and keep all those into consideration when they are reviewing each and every use.
Okay. So I guess I have another question. I mean, this one maybe is more complicated. So, I mean, I think it feels like from what we've heard in our committee, there's a pretty clear connection between paraquat use and Parkinson's, and nobody wants that. And with protection, maybe you can reduce that, but there still are potentially negative consequences. As I understand it, there have been, I think, over 6,000 lawsuits have been put against Syngenta, and millions have been paid out in damages. So I'm wondering, I mean, we're trying sort of from our side to figure out what is the best thing for public safety. I'm wondering from your side, something that is potentially harming an awful lot of people. Is there a possibility that you will stop manufacturing that product because it is proving to be so complicated? You know, I mean, 30 years ago, DDT was on the market and now it's not. And there was a mix of reasons that was taken off. But I guess I'm wondering from your side, does this feel like a thriving and useful product that's going to be continuing indefinitely without legislative parameters, or might the market naturally pare it back?
So, multiple ways to answer your question. I have no legal qualification to talk about the lawsuits or anything, so I'll stay clear of that. What we look into is what is the science that US EPA uses to evaluate the safety of the product and the safe uses that are then approved at the label. These parameters that are set on how to look into human health safety, ecological safety, environmental safety are based on processes that are from a US point of view that are developed through the OECD countries. This is the Organization of Economically Developed Countries, 13 primary members, including several EU members as well. So they all sit together and say, okay, these are the different tests, these are the criteria that we need to evaluate each and every pesticide. Now, there could be reports on what we see from a specific outcome and linking to a pesticide. However, the agency does a thorough review of the science that is in front of them, and it reviews the data that has been available. As per EPA's decision making, they have found that there are safe uses of paraquat, and the label has been approved. So again, I can talk about the process that the agency uses to review not just this particular pesticide, but any pesticide to make that determination whether they can grant a label or not for a specific use.
Representative Carlson, are you all set? You're muted now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Michelle, I'm not so sure that Syngenta has paid out any damages yet over paraquat. I haven't heard of any. They may be in suit, but they have paid out zero in damages and haven't been found liable to anything on that yet. We want to be careful with our allegations.
So it could be settlement. Maybe let's double check this. We can certainly have sources.
I can look up the sources that I've got right here. I have some facts and figures I can follow up with later. Hang on a second. I have to get on my computer. I've got two screens going.
Okay. While that's happening, Representative Bartholomew here in the room has a question.
Well, I'm wondering, you said that there's extensive testing that's done to verify safety and impacts to environment and human health and wildlife. I'm wondering, so if is it FDA or USDA or both? I guess it depends on what the chemical is. But
pesticides are predominantly EPA.
Okay, so EPA is looking at data. Where do those data come from? Are they provided? I mean, this research done by the industries, right?
Yes, that
But
is.
we're not talking independent research. So I guess what I'm wondering is then, if it's not independent research, how can we be sure that information is valid? And if it's true that there's such extensive testing, why do we keep having time after time these chemicals coming out and we find out later what the environmental damages or the health effects to humans and other species? I'm not convinced that this testing is quite as extensive and effective as you make it out to be.
That's a great question. What actually happens is the study protocols or the guidance studies, as we sometimes refer to them, those are established by the agency. Then the actual study is conducted by the registrant. That is the normal process for any regulated industry around the world. We wouldn't want taxpayer money to be used for these studies to be conducted, which in many cases for a pesticide could cost close to $300 million to bring a new AI to the market. But the key question is, how do we ensure that the data generated is accurate and is a true testing of the actual product? That is done through something called Good Laboratory Practices, GLP, which talks about documenting each and every step that happens during the testing of these pesticide products. So EPA could require up to 150 studies for a new molecule to go through EPA's registration process. Each of those studies need to be GLP certified, where there is a study director who is signing their name. They are saying that this study is accurate. One of the main reasons for that GLP certification is to make sure that this study is replicable and repeatable. If someone else was interested in carrying out the exact same study, they would be able to follow the protocol that's been established by the study director in this case and have the experiment repeated and get exactly similar results. So that's what the GLP standard sets. And around the world, whether it is for a pesticide product, pharmaceutical product, or any other chemistry, GLP methods are the one that are being used to maintain the standards of the study that is being submitted for regulatory approval process. And what usually happens is science evolves, we learn as we go on, and there are new things that we know. And as we learn these things, we adopt our regulatory methods and our standard testing methods. How we were testing pesticides, pharmaceutical, or any chemical back in the 50s is not the same way we do it today. And I'm sure in another 15, 20, 30, or 100 years, things would change. We do see a lot of computational testing coming in. We will see maybe AI coming in and doing some more advanced studies. So science evolves, and as science evolves, the regulatory system keeps up to require more data, additional information, additional testing.
Representative Nelson, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I just checked on with some of my sources, and Michelle, you were correct. Syngenta has indeed paid out some settlements on paraquat. So I'm sorry for the misinformation. You are correct.
All right, thanks for that clarification. And back to Representative Bartholomew.
I'm a little bit confused when you introduce yourself, and so you're with a company that represents other companies, is that right?
Yes, we are a trade association and we represent pesticide manufacturers, formulators, and distributors here in the US.
And does that include Syngenta?
It does.
So, and Syngenta is one of the main manufacturers of paraquat. Do I have that right?
I wouldn't know that information because we don't usually go into the product and the chemistry, who owns it, what uses are there. We primarily focus on EPA's risk assessment and the process and the science and data. We don't look into members' products.
So we don't know if they're the main. Or is who owns Syngenta? I mean, it gets so confusing when you start looking at corporations. I saw something online that said Syngenta is actually owned by Sino or Sinochem Holdings. Is that?
I couldn't give you the answer correctly, so I would rather not answer that question. I don't know what that corporate structure looks like.
All right, thank you.
Representative Burke.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, I don't know if you can answer this or not, do you know whether or not chemical companies, such as pharmaceutical companies, might go through the same type of guidelines for testing that pesticides go through? Is it like, for instance, a pharmaceutical company is testing, or the Food and Drug Administration is looking for data on a particular drug, is it the company itself that produces the drug? Are they the ones that are doing the testing the testing that informs the Food and Drug Administration?
Yes, that is correct. So any pharmaceutical company which is bringing a new pharmaceutical product or a drug or even medical device, they do the testing. Again, these are on the similar to GLP. There are other standards as well, good medical practices, manufacturing practices. So they have to follow those standards and they generate the data and submit to FDA for review. It's the same process followed by US EPA.
So if we have concerns about how pesticides are being tested, we should have similar concerns about how the pharmaceuticals are being tested.
Throughout the world, this is the system that's used. It's otherwise it would be using taxpayer dollars to conduct these studies, which are millions and billions of dollars.
Thank you.
Representative O'Brien.
Doctor, I'm trying to figure out the GLP you mentioned.
Yes.
So if paraquat is banned in over 70 countries, and I assume those policy decisions were arrived at through science, through GLP, I assume. You know of in the industry, is there a lot of, I guess, debate about why, say, 70 countries came to a conclusion with science that paraquat should be banned, while the EPA, using science here, says it still should be used in restricted ways?
So the regulatory systems do vary from country to country. One of the main factors is also the use patterns. Agriculture in some of those countries are very different from agriculture here in the US, and the pest pressures that we have, which may or may not exist in some of the other countries. It's not uncommon to find something which is approved in the US, not approved somewhere else, and vice versa. We have instances where a product is approved somewhere outside the US for use, but it's not approved in US for use. So that we see that in case of all kind of chemistries and categories. You will find it in pharmaceuticals, you'll find it in pesticides, you'll find it in food ingredients as well. That doesn't necessarily mean that there should be a global harmonization on the risk assessment decision. Risk assessment is a component of two things: the hazard, inherent hazard of the chemical itself, and the exposure to the chemical. The exposure and the use is where things may vary as per the geography.
It sounds like Syngenta has stopped selling bromoxone in Canada. Is that correct?
I can't give a answer to that question. My purview is looking into the US processes. We don't look into what the Canada market or outside US market looks like. So sorry, Representative, I cannot answer accurately.
That's just what I see online. But what's interesting is Representative Nelson lives in northern Vermont in Derby, has a farm right on the line with Canada, and in a restricted use, he could use paraquat. If we go 1 mile north, the science tells us not to use paraquat. So you can see how confusing this is to our committee. Any thoughts on that?
I'm trying to think where we have something that's available in one state in the US, but across the border, it's not available in another state. That's where I'll leave it.
Okay. I guess my last question would be, there was a pesticide called chlorpyrifos,
Chlorpyrifos, yes.
right, which was okayed by the EPA, and then years later it was banned. So what happens when their extensive tests proved to be inaccurate or they didn't go deep enough. And then later, new science proves that it was actually very, very dangerous and the risks were very high.
Chlorpyrifos is still approved for use in the US. There are limited uses. As far as I remember, there are only about 10 or 11 uses where chlorpyrifos is approved. What the US EPA is looking for, and in fact, all regulatory agencies, based on the need and the best pressure, is what are the safe uses that can be approved. And those 11 or 12 uses that the agency has identified, chlorpyrifos could still be safely used. And as I was mentioning earlier, what we do see often is, for multiple reasons, over time, as the pesticide goes through registration review every 15 years or even before that, you could very well see the number of uses being reduced. Not necessarily always because of the science evolving and the safety concern, but it could also be market driven where other new chemistries have come in.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Bartholomew.
Yeah, I did some research on my own question after you didn't know the answer. And if you can believe artificial intelligence, when you do an internet search, it's saying that Syngenta is the main manufacturer of paraquat, and that although they're based in Switzerland, and it's now owned by the Chinese state-owned conglomerate ChemChina. So I guess what I'm wondering is, with it banned in so many countries, including the country that owns the company that makes this stuff, why in the world would we want to keep using it here? I mean, they banned it in China, and it's a Chinese company that's essentially bringing this stuff to us. It's not making sense to me.
As I said, the use of the pesticide and the approval is based on the US EPA processes that are in place and the needs we have from a pest pressure and crops point of view here in the US, and how it could be safely used in the US with the appropriate PPEs, the protective equipments that are required, as well as the training requirement. As far as I recall, paraquat is a restricted use pesticide. That is a RUP, we call it. Some pesticides fall into that category. Only those who have training and registration and meet some of those licensing requirements are the ones who can buy it and apply it. It's not available for general use. Some countries have a really good enforcement and compliance policies and structure in place, like we do in the US. Other places may or may not have that, and they may make a very different regulatory decision based on their system versus the system we have in the US.
So I guess really what I'm hearing you say is I should have faith in the regulatory processes of our federal government.
All the pesticides.
I'm not sure I can do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you. Yeah, you're correct. Representative Bartholomew, Syngenta is owned by ChemChina. And remember, China has much more labor to hand weed than the United States does. But that being said, Syngenta, paraquat wasn't banned in Canada. Syngenta pulled their registration. And that, that's an option we could try here if we wanted to pull the registration. But anyway, Syngenta pulled their registration out of Canada. And that's how that's landed.
Thank you.
And John, I'm not going to use paraquat on my farm.
Glad to hear it.
Chair Durfee, I don't know if you see my hand. It's been up for a long time.
Thank you for calling it out. I didn't see it. So go ahead, Representative Bowslin.
Okay, so I'm wondering, one of the things that we learned recently in our committee was that in October of last year, EPA issued a report about the volatilization of paraquat, and that it was able to volatilize, move through space up to, I think it was 2.7 miles. And this is far different information than what was reported before. And I'm wondering, does this change anything in terms of your process? I mean, your process, as I understand it, is to look at EPA information and then move forward from there. Well, this is a really different level of movement from a very toxic substance. Is this changing anything for you?
It is what the agency has done, initiated the process every time, anytime new data or new information is available. And registrants also have a requirement to provide any new information or data that they have about the chemistry to the US EPA under something called Section 6A2 of FIFRA. The agency then could require additional data, would revisit the assessments that have been done, may require changes in the label of the product. This is the FIFRA process and the registration process that we have in the US playing out, where the EPA was made aware of a new study or new data, and the EPA then taking additional steps to ensure the safe use of the pesticide.
So is it possible EPA will issue some different guidelines about whether or not they think it's appropriate to use?
Yes, once the science is evaluated, all the data is submitted. I, again, wouldn't know what kind of data the registrants is providing and what's going on the specific chemistry. But once the due deliberations are done on the scientific technical side, there is a possibility that EPA is satisfied that it isn't a concern, or yes, it is a concern, and there needs to be more restrictions or reduction in label uses. We do see that from time to time. That is the due process.
Okay, thank you.
Doctor, I'm thinking about the question a couple of minutes ago with different approaches taken by different countries, both based on science and the point you made that there may be different pest pressures and different climates. And I'm wondering, within a country as large as the US, does the EP ever distinguish between different parts of the country in offering its assessments and apply different restrictions or different rules to different parts of the country?
Yes, not all pesticides are approved for use on all crops and in all states. So the pesticide may only be approved in 5 out of the 50 states. For 6 crops of all the crops we grow in US, there may be specific timing requirements on what time of the day you can spray to make sure it's not impacting unintended species, pollinators. So there are all those requirements in the pesticide label. It's not a single generic label which allows all uses, all crops across all the 50 states.
Since we're talking about paraquat, and that's why you're with us today, as far as you know, is paraquat treated the same all across the US from the EPA standpoint?
I don't know accurately if it is same or not, but I do know that it has limited use. So you cannot use paraquat for all crops in the US. So there are certainly some areas where it is not used at all, and then there are some places where it is used.
Based on the crop.
Yes, there is a crop restriction on the uses, and also the licensing training requirements to purchase and handle paraquat are different compared to other pesticides.
Thank you. Representative Brigham.
So we were just talking a few minutes ago where you were saying if something comes up where they're suspecting it paraquat, so the EPA would go back and do more tests, or would instruct the company to investigate that more?
The agency, as in case Representative Boslan was mentioning around the volatilization, would request, or not request, would do a data call in, is what the actual term is. And as they do a data call in, the registrant is then required to submit the additional study and conduct those testing as required by the agency. And those testing and studies need to meet the GLP standards.
Do you have any, just based on your professional opinion, and I realize that there's only so much you can say, but do you have any reason to suspect that the EPA is going to make any changes to the way it regulates paraquat?
There are about 350 scientists at US EPA with very diverse background, from toxicology to statistics to hydrology, human health, and other fields. They review the data, they do their due deliberation, and after that, if the US EPA concludes there needs to be changes, then they make those changes. Again, we don't always agree with the US EPA decisions, but we do support a very strong, robust scientific method that the agency should be using for those decisions. And if the agency finds that they need to make changes, then the agency will go in that direction and make the required changes. We have seen that happen so many times in the past.
Thank you. I think we've got one more question. Representative O'Brien.
Yes, Doctor, I was just looking at the record. So it sounds like on clopyrifos that the EPA suggested a ban, and CropLife America took the EPA to court, challenging their science. So it sounds like even CropLife America doesn't necessarily always trust EPA science.
So, as I said, we do push for robust science. What we were asking for, and again, I am not the legal person from CropLife America. There is a legal department. I cannot answer all those questions accurately, but what we ask for is the data and information based on which the agency makes any decision, whether it's a denial, cancellation, whatever that decision is. And we're looking for that scientific justification. In the case of chlorpyrifos, there were certainly concerns around that scientific justification, where EPA in its interim decision said there are 11 uses, and suddenly those 11 uses were canceled.
Thank you.
Dr. Basu, thank you very much for making time to speak with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. I think we're going to move right on, and the committee members, we're going to switch over now to a discussion about the Wood Products Manufacturers Report. I know that we had Legislative Council on the agenda first, but Ellen, I think I might ask the Land Use Review if they wouldn't mind speaking first, since they came a little early. It might make more sense. All right. Okay. Sure. We've got several new folks who have joined us online as well. Would you just like to say hello and introduce yourselves? Kristen.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Sultan. I'm one of the 5 members of the Land Use Review Board. Nice to see everyone.
Thank you. Welcome. And
I'm Jenny Ramis. I'm General Counsel for the Land Use Review Board.
welcome, Jenny.
And I'm Brooke Dingledine. I'm a member of the Land Use Review Board. Thank you for having us. And I'm here hopefully bringing gifts to you today. Thankfully, the board was able to meet, and we were also able to have time with ANR and Forest Parks to be able to discuss the language differences that we were proposing. And so we do have an agreed upon collaborative work product to provide to you and share. I'm sorry it's been sliding into home plate here for you. It's literally hot off the press. So if we can answer any questions, we can give you an explanation of where we landed versus the other language.
That would probably be helpful. Yeah, if you just want to talk high level even, or if there are specifics that you want to draw our attention to. I think we have this on our committee page too.
Yes, I think Patricia was kind enough to get it up lickety split when we said.
No, it's certainly no need to apologize for, the time that you've put into making this, get to this point.
It was really wonderful being able to have the opportunity to talk with the A&R and FPR. That was really the difficulty. We just didn't have that opportunity to all get together and work out why there were differences. So I think the easiest thing to do is to look through the actual proposal, and then because we've done things like eliminate the definitions, so I don't think we necessarily need to go over a lot of crossed out language. But what we're initially proposing, and I'm going to ask Jenny and Kirsten to jump in to bing and bang with me if it needs further explanation or clarification. But in the first section, this is when we are making sure, like in farming, that when the tract of land is being used for those purposes, farming, but in this instance, logging and forestry, that only the portions of the parcel or the tract that support the development shall be subject to regulation under this chapter. What that means is that when we say that support the development, the portion of the tract where I want to go make my commercial or industrial development, and the areas that are supportive of that, like I gave you the example the other day, like the road to get to, or the driveway area to get to that commercial building. This provides assurance that it is only those portions of the tract that are part of that development. That's part of regulation, but there would not be conditions on the other portions of the parcel that don't support the development or that restrict or conflict with the AMPs. What we're trying to do is say there are two separate areas. And what we want to make sure of is the area that's subject to the regulation is the development, not the balance of that area that would be logged or forested. So we think that we've come to the correct language. We agreed with A&R on their changes. So that section, we think, provides the right references that we needed to the AMPs. And so we tightened that up.
And this is the language that A&R had presented a couple of days ago in committee here.
Right.
This section.
Right. The bulk of it we had provided, and then they made changes to it. So we have accepted those changes. So we're in agreement on this version.
May I jump in here with a
Please.
with a quick clarification? So A&R had suggested language that focused on mitigation areas, and that those would be part of the land that supports the development, and we concur. And that's the application of Act 250. That's, there's different ways that applicants can identify land to mitigate to satisfy various Act 250 criteria. And so we agree with the Agency of Natural Resources that such mitigation lands would be part of the land that supports the development. And we agreed that it was unnecessary to include that detail in the final wording of this section of proposed statute.
Okay, so we shouldn't be looking for any language that reflects what you just said.
Correct.
Right,
It was
okay.
within this paragraph as suggested by A&R, but it's been removed in a couple locations.
Okay.
Looks like
Representative
there's a
Lipsky.
question.
Thank you, Kirsten. For examples, a privacy buffer from possibly a highway might be an example of one of those mitigating areas, or a stormwater retention basin or system might be another example of what is supporting mitigating.
Yes, that's under criterion 8 aesthetics. one of the factors that's considered is whether or not the applicant has included, reasonable mitigation, and that could be an aesthetic buffer. It could be an area has a restriction on removal of vegetation of that type that the commission finds is needed to satisfy the criteria. So those are great examples.
Thank you.
Now, let me explain why we took that language, why we suggested to A&R to remove the language. Because later on, they had also asked us to focus just on the conditions of the permit, that we needed to hold that's where you looked to determine that you couldn't conflict with what was articulated in those conditions, because there are different documents within the Act 250 database. We have findings of fact, conclusions of law, and then we also have permits that have conditions that are enumerated. And A&R talked about not wanting to also go into the record and having to look at other documents. So what we were trying to accomplish by removing that language, all of those buffer areas or mitigation areas, whether it's even off-site mitigation for prime ag soils, they will be included in the permit conditions. And so we felt that this was duplicative language. It was like talking about portions of the permit instead of just talking about the more general term. So that's why we thought it was unnecessary. We thought it might also be somewhat confusing, because mitigation and buffers, you don't necessarily talk about buffers as mitigation per se. It might be something that is just referred to as a buffer. So we thought simplicity was better, not to add additional language that would then require additional analysis when in fact it was already covered.
So if I can jump in again, quickly to mention that this first paragraph of proposed legislation also included a last sentence that you may remember Brooke testifying when she was with this committee last, that it was not understood. And so we did agree similarly with the Agency of Natural Resources that this, and of course we would let them speak for themselves, but we did meet today and jointly agree that sentence was thought to be unnecessary, because it was sort of duplicating the whole premise here of logging and forestry being exempt, and when occurring on a tract that would also be put forward for commercial development, the portions designated for logging and forestry would not be regulated. So it was, we determined, and it was the Land Use Review Board's position that somewhat lengthy sentence was unnecessary. So that's also been removed or not included in this language that we're coming forward to recommend.
Right, and the conversation that we had centered around the notion that there was concern because there were two particular cases, one from some time ago, but one more recent, where, and it was explained that if there were forestry activities going on the property, and then those products were then used by a wood products manufacturer on the property that was commercial, that somehow that logging activity or forestry activity would be brought into as supportive of the development, the commercial activity. That was what the concern emanated from. And the language that A&R had proposed in that sentence is actually mimicking some language that exists in the agricultural exemption area, but it's not the farming exemption. It has to do with an analogous situation if there were mulch being produced on the property. And there's some similarities to it, but the analysis breaks down because here, this is clearly, and we want to make sure and represent that what we're talking about here is something that is exempt. The logging and the forestry is not jurisdictional. Therefore, it could not be supportive of this development because it is not triggering any kind of, it's not a commercial activity. So it is not part of what is the basis for becoming any supportive activity like the driveway was, something like that. And Kirsten and I looked back at the one older case, and we will be also reviewing the newer situation to make sure that if there was jurisdiction asserted, it was done correctly, but to ensure going forward that this should not be a concern, because if we have no jurisdiction, that's the end of the story. And there's no way to, we do not in any way interpret the statute to allow Act 250 to bootstrap in an exempt activity into something else happening that's a commercial venture on the property. That would be violative and completely opposite the entire opportunity to I don't want to use Stony Brook too often, but to segment the
Don't say that
activity.
anymore.
Yeah, we don't want to talk about that word anymore, but sure. This is, so we want to make sure that this committee knows and the public knows that is how jurisdiction works. It is not any kind of, there is no mechanism here to try to bootstrap any kind of forestry or logging that's exempt into a commercial supportive role. And Kirsten and I will also look at the more recent one, but I will tell you that the old case is a very complicated site plan map that is vastly complicated, but I will go back and try to understand exactly what took place. Because we don't want any perception that Act 250 is trying to assert jurisdiction. We're trying to clarify this and make sure that wood products manufacturers have the benefits that they are entitled to. So
Thank you. Representative O'Brien has a question.
I just wondered how granular sometimes the Act 250 permitting is. Like, we can use our example of, 90 acres of forest used for logging road gets improved for that 10 acres of development, say a sawmill, at the back of the parcel. Does that improved road then become part of the permit, even if it's continued to be used for logging on that parcel?
we're working on the road rule or the road construction jurisdiction. I don't want to call it road rule. That's the old one that was different. And we are working on that presently, but we have actually asked for that deadline to be extended as well as the tier 3, trying to coordinate those and criterion 8C. It's very important, first of all, that the road construction jurisdiction does not get triggered on July 1st of any year. That makes it completely just not logistically possible to, when does Google Earth take their photograph, right? It would be much easier to do that during the non-construction season, not smack dab in the middle of it. From an enforcement standpoint, or being able to establish when were roads built and when they were not. But those definitions of what a road is, what a driveway is, that is literally what we're working on and we'll be taking up Monday at our board meeting. But the notion, there is a provision in that statute that is conversion of farm roads or logging roads. And if there's a conversion of the road for the purposes of this road construction rule, meaning, okay, it's being built or perhaps improved, that's what we're trying to figure out, for access to a development. That's, so it's a different, and then you figure out how long are you constructing this road or improving the road. But the board has made it very clear that existing roads are existing roads, and we are not reading the statute at this point, and this has been conceptually discussed by the board. We are not using that to try to seize any kind of jurisdiction over existing roads. If existing roads exist, We don't go into an analysis like you do. There's some provisions about class 4 roads if a non-municipality is improving them. So it's coming attractions literally within 2 weeks or so. We should have some guidance decided on, and we are trying to be very careful about understanding what the purpose of the road construction rule is, about cluster development as opposed to sprawl, and really trying to give a lot of thought to how do we implement this in a way that accomplishes that, and also understanding how concerned people are about how this may play out in terms of their properties. So we're taking the time to try to figure that out and are working on guidance that we must issue shortly. But gosh, it would be wonderful if the legislature would push that date off because it really is problematic.
So I'm going to just ask that
I'm sorry to get so off
yeah,
topic.
I know there's a lot of interest in this committee, and I already see a hand that I'm not going to acknowledge. We'll wait for any further discussions on the road rule, Tier 3, et cetera, et cetera. Let's try.
I'm sorry.
Let's try and just get through this, and I want to make sure that our ledge council can stay. Yeah. Okay. Good. So if there's a question or if there's something, yes, go ahead, Jenny.
I just wanted to add in response to the question that was asked, how granular the delineations are for Act 250 permits on these types of properties that have less than full jurisdiction. I believe Kirsten, in her infinite experience as a coordinator prior to her position on the board, can correct me, but we typically require specific mapping, and the permits themselves will describe, the first, the not quite a meets and bounds, but that sort of level of detail of which portion of a road or which buildings, how far parking will extend in those portions. So it's not. The goal is to give, under current processes, that people walk away with a permit that very easily helps them understand which parts of their land become jurisdictional and which are not.
I agree.
I was just, you're getting at what I was wondering about is if a road, say, crosses a parcel that 9/10 of it was exempt, at some point, does that development then rule out this whole exemption of the 9/10 of it?
I mean, I'm going to give you my favorite answer in the world, which is it depends. And and it's also important to remember that there could be potentially multiple reasons a project triggers Act 250 jurisdiction that might affect that. So I'm not quite ready to opine on how the road rule would, but say you've got a situation where you've got your commercial operation in right on the road, and there's a driveway, and then you drive around behind the commercial operation, and then that same without leaving that road, you connect into logging roads that access the rest of the property. Those would not be jurisdictional because they don't serve the commercial operation. So just so even if jurisdiction lands on the part that connects, the public access to the original, that doesn't sweep the entire network of roads automatically into Act 250 jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I will tell you, in terms of how we have been contemplating it, we are not of the opinion that there's going to be any jurisdiction on the existing road. We are tying our analysis to the construction of improvements or new road. So it's not like just because there's a road and now it's serving something else that automatically the distance of that road is somehow jurisdictional. There must be physical action on the land. That's really important to the way that we're looking at this.
I do appreciate
I'm sorry.
sensitivity to, no, there is a lot of interest throughout the legislature and in this committee, maybe particularly to these other issues that you've been working on. So Thank you, but I think if we can just get through the rest of this document, then we can get an early start on our I don't want to call it a vacation, but our week off and town meeting week, yeah.
Certainly. So the next section, it's 6001 3C. C is the section that has some information about how to calculate jurisdiction in like particular subject matter contexts kind of things. Some of the sections have been deleted, but we thought that this was a good, instead of doing those definitions, one thing that we just wanted to be sure of is because we're not defining forestry or logging, and there are other definitions like forestry operations in statute, but we thought that this part of it was important, and that is to put in forestry as referenced in, and this is the exemption area that's in this section. It's below it. Does not include conversion of land for non-exempt uses, such as for a commercial or industrial purpose constituting development, as defined in this chapter. And maybe Kirsten can give a good explanation of this better than I. We just wanted to make sure that, well, Kirsten, jump in and explain this if you could. I don't want to bumble through it.
Yeah, so there can be some activities that could be part of a forestry type operation. I guess the example I'll give would be operation of a portable sawmill. And it's common, as I'm sure Representative Lipsky or others, you know, who know more about logging and forestry than I do, but can attest that, you know, people operate portable equipment to produce firewood, to produce lumber. And this happens at properties where logging has occurred, or sometimes at other off-site locations. And if there's no construction of improvements, Act 250 does not regulate those kinds of activities. However, there can be some cases where, for instance, someone might put up a building and be using equipment, including that kind of equipment, and where there could be Act 250 jurisdiction depending on the facts, like depending on the acreage, does the town have zoning and subdivision, et cetera. So we just wanted to underscore that if land is converted for that kind of commercial like development as already defined in Act 250, that's not an exempt activity. And this was part of working out the removal of the definitions that we've agreed to.
Yeah, I'll jump in and add to Kirsten. It serves on both ends. Bluntly, it prevents people from claiming the logging exemption for activities that are clearly pretextual to major development. And then on the other end, it prevents Act 250 from exerting jurisdiction in temporary situation. Like Kirsten was saying, with like operations that don't have any long-term impacts on the land, because the equipment comes in, it goes out, it's done. They didn't build anything. They didn't create any kind of commercial development. So it's guardrails on both sides of those circumstances.
Like it.
And then we have 6144, which everyone has been in agreement, which I understand Kirsten had identified early on. We're pulling log and pulp concentration yards out of wood products manufacturing so that can happen as forest and logging and forestry. And then the final section, we came together on the wording of it. That's the section where we simplify things. Instead of findings and plans and all that stuff, we use just the you can't violate a condition of the permit kind of language. So it's very simple. You look at one document, you know exactly what's going on. But the first portion of it is in 6081, we have, a permit or permit is needed or not needed. That's sort of what's in that. That is what's in that section. So it reads no permit or permit amendment, because we wanted to be sure that we covered land that was not under Act 50 jurisdiction or land that was under Act 250 jurisdiction. So neither a permit or a permit amendment is required for logging and forestry below the elevation of 2,500 feet that will not conflict with or violate any condition of a permit issued pursuant to this chapter. Nice and simple. And then to ensure clarity, we have permits shall include a statement that logging and forestry activities consistent with this section and below the elevation of 2,500 feet are exempt from amendment jurisdiction. The only reason why there's only amendment jurisdiction in that section is that you're talking about a permit issuing and having actual language in it. So you would only need it as amendment.
Representative Lipsky.
Yes, thank you, Council Brooke. Going back to the upper paragraph, there's a cross out line that
The D.
goes through O and D, or just D and a semicolon. So I would, is there a period after fuel wood?
Yes, the period is all the way at the very end. We just got that a little bit. We caught the D and the the D should not be caught. Kirsten, if we can change in wood products manufacturer, the strikeout caught the D of wood before the semicolon.
Gotcha. Thank you. I concur.
And then,
If I can also mention with respect to this last paragraph, thank you to ANR for catching that we had inadvertently omitted the reference to forestry in the second sentence and also the reference to below 2,500 feet. We had some different versions of this floating around and we had caught the error ourselves. And then anyway, I think what you're looking at has now been corrected. And thank you to ANR and FPR for helping us with that.
yeah, then finishing my question was after the new period, fuel wood does not include firewood. What does that mean? Is it ethanol product, fuel that's derived from processing wood? And yeah, that's what is fuel wood. We have before that wood chips.
It is the
Not quite sure I
existing
understand the
statute.
question.
So in the existing statutory language, the D we were just talking about that we accidentally struck through. So that is from fuel wood. What the question is, what is fuel wood?
Thing.
Because if it's firewood,
That'd be pellets.
we're not talking about. What are we talking about?
Wood chips are 4 words uphill from that. So
One way of interpreting this, and again, this is existing language.
Right.
So you've identified the fact that we enumerated firewood, wood chips, mulch, but what if there's some other kind of wood that you want to burn for fuel that isn't any of those? It would at least be captured here. And rather than try and
yeah, I don't want to mess this up.
relitigate that, yeah, that was a 4-year ago definition, so
Okay.
yeah. We can talk about it, afterwards too, but this is not language that anybody's proposing to change. It's already existing.
I love the change.
You may wish to ask Billy Coster and ANR. There may be a specific definition in their regulations that helps identify what the distinction is.
I'll get these pellets.
Commissioner Fitzko is allowing it, maybe pellets.
Could be.
Pellets.
Let's keep going. I want to
pellet
keep
mills
us on track here. Representative Burt has a question.
Yeah, I mean, it's all in the same area, but the next sentence after fuel wood products manufacturer does not include facilities that purchase, market, resell finished goods such as wood furniture, wood pellets, and milled lumber without first receiving wood products from forestry operations. I have a few questions here. First, what are we talking about? What category of manufacturers? This will be my first question. I'll have another one after that.
I think what this section does is it tries to create a definition for what's a wood products manufacturer, but then they don't want Home Depot to be able to say that they're a wood products manufacturer. So I see this as a line between wood products manufacturing, which is commercial, but versus like straight normal, retail sales of stuff that they buy from a wood products manufacturer. So that's what I think the different silo is that they're trying to keep separate.
So it says without first receiving wood products from forestry operations. Does that mean that someone who maybe makes wood furniture but starts with a log?
Yeah, it would mean like I get milled wood versus like.
I know it myself.
Yeah. So, Jenny, can you help on this?
I can help a little bit, I think, if you want.
I defer to Kirsten because she's
Yeah,
very
I mean,
well versed.
so this definition, as I understand it, was put into the statute concurrent with the other changes that were made to provide special benefits for the sector around, and I don't know if these were the ones that happened in 2022, but one-to-one Primex soil mitigation, special consideration for operating hours. And so I think what that second sentence is saying is that a wood products manufacturer would be a category of development that would receive wood products from a forestry operation, like raw logs, for instance, and then manufacture them and add value into some other product. And that is the wood products manufacturer activity that is entitled to the benefits defined elsewhere in the statute. And as Brooke indicated, these other ones that are excluded are retail type businesses that purchase, market, and resell those goods. That they're not manufacturing them, they're doing that purchase, market, and reselling activity.
And I guess I have another question alongside this. It says wood products manufacturer does not include facilities. Whereas the definition of wood products manufacturer right above this means a manufacturer that aggregates wood products. I'm curious as to why we might use manufacturer in that definition, but in the one below it, which we're going over, uses the word facilities, not manufacturer. And that's one place where I get a little confused because a wood products manufacturer may or may not include a facility in my mind.
So I'm just going to say here
And
that
I feel like this is important to me because if somebody is able to manufacture things, and I prefer the idea here is to make sure that wood products manufacturers get a carve out, make it like agriculture. That is I would love to see that happen. But I'm confused as to when we're triggering Act 250 in terms of, is this a mobile unit? Does this require a small concrete pad like the case in Kirby, Vermont, where he's looking to put a pad underneath what is a mobile unit, but in order to stabilize a mobile unit? And then here we have we're saying manufacturer, that doesn't imply a facility necessarily. Maybe it does. I don't know. I'm confused. And then we have wood products manufacturer does not include facilities. So it's using facility in one part of this, manufacturer in another. Should we be using manufacturer for both, facility for both?
So here's what I'm going to say. This is all existing language, and we have really asked the board here to come and explain the changes that they're proposing to existing language. And this particular paragraph is only here because the proposal was to remove the language that's struck out. I think if we want to have a conversation about the things that you're bringing up, and maybe that you're bringing up too, Jen, we might better have those with Ledge Council, because I don't think the board has necessarily come prepared to dig into all the nuances of our language essentially. Not to say that we don't have three people who are very fluent with all of this and that we couldn't have a good, robust debate. But just in terms of the task in front of us, which is whether we want to fully understand the proposal that has been jointly made here, and then we can break Ledge Council up and ask, I want to have Ledge Council weigh in on these changes, but we can also then talk about those things.
And we can certainly look at this and get back to you if you'd like, any opinion about it. But you're right, it's a little bit, we may have our individual opinions, but coming together as a group is how we really can look best at this for you.
And
A&R certainly can.
yeah, and all of which isn't to suggest that, existing statute can't be looked at, revisited, revised and fixed. Cases like this where you found there's something that needs to be fixed, so we're fixing it. I'm not sure whether we got through to the end, we finished that last section.
I think so.
So unless there are other questions, thank you very much for joining us today, for all the time we put into this. I applaud the efforts in the 2+ different entities to come to some agreement. That's great. And I'm wondering if Ledge Council, who's been listening, would you be able to join us now and give us some feedback, if any, on this, what we've just heard?
Sorry, I don't think I have much to add.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and you're welcome to stay if you'd like, but if you need to leave, that's fine too.
I'll stay and listen. Thank you.
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. I provided the committee today a draft 3.1. It's fairly close to what the board has given you, but it's not the same. And so, but my initial reaction to what they have provided is that it is well drafted, and if it meets your needs, I think it works.
So a lot, right, and I didn't even post 3.1.
Oh, you did, I'm sorry, okay.
I realized that I was hoping anyway that we might get this. And rather than confuse things, I figured a lot of this is identical, but
it's pretty close, yeah.
But there are a few things that have been added. So nothing jumps out at you as this could be, or you'd want to think about it more.
Additional thinking is always good, but so far it all makes sense.
We're not gonna vote anything today, so we all have time for additional thinking over the break, and we'll wait till we come back. But while we have you here, we may have some other questions. And Representative Lipsky.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Representative Bird's confusion here, because I share that. And he cited an example of Kirby Malls right off of Route 2. We had a long time firewood processing operation, didn't need a permit, had not engaged in any development, quote unquote. When he set up a mulch operation, required him to protect his product, a porous slab. Wasn't a building, but the development of that slab triggered an Act 250 review. It cost him, it was in the six figures. I've heard 200,000, I've heard over the last, but in that realm, to go through the process. And it was extensive in mandatory mapping of all of his land as to floodplain. It turned out none of his land was floodplain, but that was a very expensive project. So when we've talked about development of facilities, if to produce mulch out of grindings, barks of particular grinding, even though there's no building or facility, slab, you know, that's concerning. But I guess we need to know, and I was thinking that, you know, chip and mulch operations wouldn't trigger, would be exempt. But if we can understand that it's the pouring a slab, so the mulch wouldn't be on the ground, is that enough to trigger review? That's my question, Chairman.
So, yeah, and maybe Ellen can also just make sure that we're clear on the distinction between wood products manufacturers and logging and forestry. So the exemption in Act 250, as I understand it, is for logging and forestry under 20 feet. Wood products manufacturers don't enjoy that same exemption.
They do not.
They do not. So sawmills have to go, as we know, have gone through the permitting process. And this section here that we're looking at is not here because we're giving it an exemption or that anybody has suggested it as part of this conversation that it should have an exemption, but just because for other reasons, this definition was created to several years ago to give some special treatment, not exemption, but some special treatment. And inadvertently, it lumped in the log and pulp concentration yards.
I'm very grateful that they're struck, but you need to understand that chipwood is very typically produced when whole tree logging takes place. Feller buncher, dual extractable skidders, they bring all the product to the landing, and on that landing, they separate out near logs, saw logs, pulp logs, firewood logs, and then chipwood. And often you'll see a mountain that might stretch for 100 yards, 300 feet on a large landing. And they can get a chip contractor to come in with, and they can maybe fill a 45-foot box trailer that's going to either Rygate, Middlebury College, the state offices here, and offload those chips to the market. That only takes place on a forestry operation log landing. So chipping of wood on the landing is part of a forestry operation. So but that's rolled in with mulch and peel wood. It's not manufacturing. All that typically takes place on the log.
So, and I think that somebody can jump in here, that if it does take place out in the woods at the landing or out in the logging site, that it's not considered development, it's part of logging and forestry. It's
in the end, you need a mulch and seed. And
But according to this right here, a manufacturer that aggregates wood products from forestry operations and adds value through processing or marketing. That includes wood chips.
so let's ask Ellen to clarify that.
This definition was intended to capture the one-step remove commercial operation of value-added work to these products. I remember very clearly sitting with the advocates on this definition. This was language that was requested. Happy to have it amended for you if you don't like it or think it fits.
When you say the advocates, you mean advocates
At
for
the time of this drafting, there was a number of different sides. Yeah. So I can't remember.
in this committee.
Yes, it took place in this committee and in House Natural Resources at the time. So and I think it went to a few committees.
So I think that just the confusion is that we have instances where wood chips are produced and manufactured out in the woods. no permits required. And then there are commercial operations where wood chips are manufactured, where there is a permit required. And this is talking about the second situation. Is it, and it is confusing because there are these two different situations, but this is only talking about the second situation.
Yes.
We same for firewood too.
Firewood too, yeah. If you've got a portable,
Yeah, you can't read the second sentence in isolation. It comes after the first sentence. So it has to be a manufacturer that's aggregating products from a forestry operation, not a forestry operation itself.
Senator Brigham.
So how does that, there's a bunch of these guys with these portable sawmills that go around during summer and stuff and process. A lot of times in the winter, they bring it home, but they've got a pole barn with a roof. And they park it in there and saw some of their own stuff. I mean, are they, if they have a slab in their pole shed, they're automatically thrown into Act 250.
Act 250 is triggered for various reasons under the statute when there's construction of improvements for a commercial operation. So if they have a business and they're constructing something for that business, they may be triggering Act 250.
But not for an existing building. Thank you, Alan. Commissioner Fusco, while we have you here, do you want to just come up and say anything about the language that we just looked at with Fuller?
So much to add. I'm happy to come up if you want to.
Just if you want to come up and let us know.
For the record, Danielle Fitzko, Commissioner, Forest Parks and Recreation. I do want to sort of address Representative Lipsky's question that you just were asking. What we're talking about here, I think as the chair mentioned, this is the exemption for forestry and logging. There really is not an exemption for wood products manufacturers. This came out of the stakeholder process that happened last year. There was discussions about giving exemptions or some sort of exemptions for wood products manufacturers. We did not come to consensus on that, but I do believe, and after even my conversation today with the Land Use Review Board, I think there's opportunities for the future for conversations. I was really pleased in our conversations today that we all felt like we were pulling in the same direction, that forestry and logging is working lands and should be exempt. And I can tell they were working hard to sort of get that language consistent with that. So this is a step in a good direction. I will also share that some of the recommendations that came out of the wood products manufacturing report was more of a concierge service for wood products manufacturers. They don't have many that go through Act 250, but when they do, we want to provide upfront services so that they can go through it with holding their hands, really, because it can be confusing, we know, and it's a lot. And then also what I heard from the Land Use Review Board is that they're doing internal training. They are training their staff on how to better review permits, be considerate of wood product manufacture, forestry and logging, and also providing guidance materials. So it's what you're seeing here is one piece of the puzzle. There are some other wraparound services to really support the sector better.
Those are some of the other recommendations. Are you talking about?
Yes, so they're not statutory recommendations, but there are other things that the Land Use Review Board is doing, and the forest, our departments have been reviewed and supporting, and A&R in general. A&R's permit assistance will provide sort of that concierge service because it's not just Act 250, right? You've got to go through the stormwater, you've got to go through a whole bunch of other permitting process. They will prioritize providing assistance to wood products manufacturers.
I, for one, very grateful for these clarifications and your collaborative work. And that there may be some questions and things that may become an issue that sound like there's process for those.
I'm grateful for the conversation. And I think it will continue to daylight opportunities.
While we have you here and well, the committee's all still here in person and online, any other questions about any of this that you wanted to ask Commissioner Fusco? anything Act 250 related.
Jeez.
So can I get a park pass?
You know, if you give us $2 million, all Vermonters can have that.
Yeah, it's, I go online.
So just to make sure I understand. As of right now, the understanding on when a wood products manufacturer is that would trigger Act 250, is this sort of operation that operates for a longer duration of time in one place, performing the activities that are listed here, and may or may not include a facility.
Right, so I'll try, but may need to have others come in. Wood products manufacturers, if they are, if it's development that triggers Act 250, they are treated like any other commercial development. It's forestry operation, forestry and logging that's exempt. So any processing on site, anything temporary like chipping, that's not considered a commercial like development. So wood products manufactured are really treated like any other development right now in the process of Act 250. So it triggered based on zoning and acres of impact. Yeah.
There has to be physical action on the land.
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be commencement of construction.
There you go. This is not my area. I do think there's opportunities like the Kirby mulch situation that there could be some minimal impact that could be something to discuss. Yeah.
It's, and this definition is here again, because 4 years ago, we did create some special, not exemptions, but like hours of operation or
I think it was hours of operation.
just hours of operation.
Yeah, that was a couple of years ago.
So they're treated just for Act 250 purposes. They have to get a permit like anybody else. But once they're up and running, then they can do things that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do before this was added.
And some of those changes that were made, I know that the Land Use Review Board is now trying to make that like upfront knowledgeable, that when a wood products manufacturer is going through the permit application process, those sort of, I guess they are kind of exemptions or considerations for those industries is known, as opposed to like, you have to kind of know it to actually like ask for it. It's upfront now in the permitting process.
Yeah, Representative Nelson.
Well, you asked for it, Chair. You said any questions relating to Act 250, but I'm gonna leave them alone because I have a lot of questions in Tier 3, and it probably doesn't completely pertain to the bill that we've been working on here. Thank you, everybody, for the great discussion.
I will say, sorry, Richard, I'm gonna say, I spoke to, so I think we've met 4 of the 5 board members now, and one of them who's not here today, I specifically asked the other day, because you had raised a question about, and this has nothing to do with this forestry, but about the treatment of agriculture, the exemption that agriculture has always had from Act 250. Is there anything in Act 181 about Tier 3 and changing that? And the answer I got was no, absolutely nothing has changed about agriculture being exempt, as it historically has been in Tier 3 or any other tier. I just wanted to say that because I'd forgotten to tell you earlier, Richard, if that helps. John.
Just the chair brought this up at the very beginning of this discussion about the word devoted, and does everybody agree on devoted? I was just thinking, does devoted, for example, if that tract is in current use with a forestry plan, does that by definition mean it's devoted to forestry and logging?
The devoted language is the current language I think exists with the agriculture exemption. I mean, when I read it, I'm like, oh, not the whole property doesn't have to be devoted. Like say with the example, I think that's gone around with like you have 100 acre, 90 acres is in development, but you got 10 acres in forestry. Is the parcel really devoted? I think that that's language that LURB uses and recognizes in agriculture, so they feel like it can extend over to forestry. That's sort of they're trained on that devoted language. I think I'd have the conversation with LURB. To me, I look at it like, it doesn't make sense, but there's precedent here and it's working for ag.
Because, you know, what I thought also is the new section of reserve forest land is certainly not devoted to logging. So whether that would get into any sort of wordsmithing trouble in the future.
It is devoted to forestry because it is still an active management program. And so I think the goal is like what we're talking about is the developed envelope and unless there's and what the permit entails, and then the rest of that's forested would be exempt, which may or may not be managed, really. I mean, but forestry work and logging would absolutely not be considered development. I think that's a clarity we're trying to achieve. It's been there, but it hasn't always been fully executed the way we had hoped. And I think there's recognition of that.
I think, we've had enough. We've spoken a lot about the devoted to language and been told, it's going to be fine. I think if it turns out that down the road, somebody interprets it differently, we will jump right on that. So I think if both the parties here have felt that that's good language, then all right, let's go ahead. And if somebody has a problem with it, we'll remember this conversation. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. I'm rolling my brain back almost 4 years when out of the Rural Caucus, and part of my Forest Future Strategic Roadmap implementation, we were trying to the Rural Caucus suggested as adding language to this bill now 3 years ago, 2+ years, that small scale firewood producers, small scale chip or mulch yards, small scale sawmills be exempt from Act 250 review. It was not an insignificant ask. We wrote a letter including this and was sent to the Environment Committee, who was taking testimony on that bill. They rejected our suggestion and it never was included. But it was included in a way for the study committee, or where there was testimony that the LURB would consider wood products manufacturing as part of their overall. So I think that's some of the pathway of the beginning history to how that happened.
You're correct. The report did not generate direct priority actions to really legislatively change what would trigger a permit for a wood products manufacturer. I think there's probably some more opportunity for that discussion. There was more of the concierge service and training and education that they're there to support that, which is fantastic. I do feel like there's probably some opportunities for continued discussion.
Right. Anybody have anything else?
Talking about current use and if that parcel.
Nothing from me.
90 acres of woods and the guy's gonna develop 10-acre site for some, he had to pull that out of current use and pay the penalty.
On the rest of the land, yeah, right.
On that portion.
On the portion he pulled.
Ask me about current use.
That's correct. You'd have a land use change tax.
And if you want more conversation, I have had the fact he's a Mennonite owner on the Woodbury Elmore line, had him out to the farm. got some logs, I want to make a horse fence, I want to make a horse stable. He saws them out, there's a pickup truck, takes the mill out after 2 days. He brings his own fuel can to power the little Kohler motor. They're fantastic. That is not a commercial sawmill operation, it's a mobile wheel, might stay 2 days, might stay 1. That happens all the time, all over rural Vermont. That is not what wood products manufacture. So you might have skidded out a whole bunch of firewood logs. You say, hey, Jed, can you bring your wood processor over? Instead of me taking a month, you do it in 2 days and drag out and leave. I'm sensing that is not a wood manufacturing business.
I would disagree a little bit. I mean, there's a definition of what a wood products manufacturer is. But that doesn't mean just because you're in that category that somehow you're under Act 250 jurisdiction when you are doing your business out in the woods. It is, and so I just want to be sure that it's understood that there is that definition that says, I mean, because sure, they're commercial, they are selling the product that they're creating, but that has nothing to do with triggering Act 250 jurisdiction. It's a portable sawmill, so he's not constructing improvements on the land, and so there's no development happening. That is what triggers Act 250. It's development for a commercial purpose or industrial purpose on the requisite acreage and all of that, or some other trigger. So I just want to be sure that that nuance is understood. It's not a bad thing to be categorized in that area. In fact, it's a good thing, because then if he needs to be doing his portable sawmill business at 9 o'clock at night to be able to finish, because he only has 2 weeks to get it done, there is allowance for that, and he is permitted to not have any concern about normal operating hours and being, and then there's definitions about whether it's a nuisance, a civil nuisance. So there's protection to be inside of that definition, but it does not trigger jurisdiction in and of itself.
So that protection, those protections exist even for a business that isn't otherwise under jurisdiction. So you talked about hours of operations, that would be.
I don't have it in front of me, but there are provisions about portable sawmills and then stationary ones that are minimally operating, during a limited time frame. Maybe
There's also the right to forestry.
right to forestry, like
Similar to right to agriculture, that does provide protection from nuisance.
Nuisance laws, yeah.
And that's more recent too. That was probably within the past 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, and then we've been talking a lot about municipal regulation of agriculture, and municipal regulation of forestry is also a thing that we don't have to worry about because the exemption is very clear there. Towns can't regulate,
So are there rules somewhere else that clarify like different categories of scale of wood products manufacturing in somewhere besides our statute?
I think that like the sawmill situation, I think it's title 10 or 12.
Probably 10, I'm guessing. So the scale, because right now, I think what's the right to forestry is more like the portable temporary nature of forestry and logging. That is protected under the right to forestry. When you start getting into the manufacturing, and really when you have development and a footprint change in the land, there is no scale associated with it. What triggers it's what's going to trigger Act 250 or the other permitting. It may not even trigger Act 250, but could trigger a wetlands permit or other permitting. So there's no real exemptions or scale of that. If it's you're developing and changing the land, you have to see if you're going to trigger a permit. It's the temporary nature of forestry and logging that has the protections.
If there's wood products manufacturer development on a parcel that is not owned by that business, but owned by a landowner, say extensive forest, who applies for the permit? Is it the property owner or the business?
Don't quote, but because I, in my private practice, I stopped doing actual permits themselves, but my understanding from long ago is that it requires co-applicancy or signatory by the landowner as well as the applicant, if the applicant is different than the landowner. That's the good thing about Act 250. You will see over like the PUC, the landowner doesn't necessarily have to even receive notice of anything. And here we make sure that there's accountability because our permits run with the land.
Okay,
So whoever is the owner of that piece of ownership, or even if it's less than that, needs to be notified of that.
We see that on state land with our ski areas.
Yeah.
We sign as landowners. But they submit the application.
Right, good. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Yep.
Have a good break.
So before we sign off, just a reminder, we're not here next week. And we will be back at 10 on the following Tuesday. We might have an early day, Wednesday and or Thursday, in like a 9 o'clock start. We'll get the agenda will get posted. We'll probably post it on Friday, next Friday. I think that's the same kind of routine. And
Betsy Ann will send out.
Betsy Ann will send the normal thing. Yep. Patricia and I will figure out an agenda by next Friday and have that posted.
On our
Check on our committee page. But we won't start any earlier than 10. Normal Tuesday start.
Because we have a lot of bills to get through, so.
Can I say one thing before we sign off, Chair?
Sure, go ahead, Michelle.
Just wanted to suggest to my fellow committee members, next week when I get back from DC, I actually am spending one day going to the local high school and going to the cafeteria and meeting with the nutrition director and having a tour of the kitchen and having lunch there. And so if anybody else wanted to check out what your different schools were like in your area, even just one, to pop in and have a meal, have a school lunch, come back and compare notes, that would be interesting. So just if you have a chance and you're interested, I would love more research from around the state to see what you find in terms of what kinds of foods are being served to our kids.
Not a bad idea.
So I'll have my 4 daughters do reconnaissance for me.
Can I add something to that real quick? We're looking at doing a large grant called Forest to Tray, which is looking at school lunches and how they are what they're served on or in, and looking at doing wood product based. It's like the biggest restaurant ever, like 8 million lunches over the year. So see what they're served on too, and what they're served in.
So like a paper plate or
is it
plastic
plastic?
tray?
Trays,
Or a container that's.
Wood fiber.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. And we will have a lot to do when we get back, but I think we're closer on a couple of these bills anyway.
Hey, y'all have a great